Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhutaguhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarvavide Namaha. Oh, good. Nice to see you all. Welcome also to the many students attending this class online. We continue in this very deep section of chapter 18. Pardon me? Oh, thank you. Gosh, I space out on this stuff so much. Thank you. I'm supposed to push these buttons here. I'm more interested in this. Not surprisingly. So, in this section of chapter 18, Shankaracharya has been unfolding this pratibimba vada. And please remember that when we say that consciousness is reflected in your mind, it is a, what is the word I'm going to use? Metaphor. And I'm kind of stressing this point because people often fail to discern that these are metaphors. You know, the mind is not a mirror. The mind is like a mirror, fine, but the mind is not a mirror. Consciousness is like light in that it illumines mental objects, but consciousness is not light. Even when we say consciousness shines, that's a metaphoric expression. It's like saying, oh, you look shining today. You know, you don't glow in the dark. We use these metaphoric expressions all the time. Okay, enough said. But he's using Pratibimba-vada to teach who is the jiva, who is the samsari, who travels. And we've seen some preliminary examination of this. Different options were examined. Obviously, one thing we know for sure, the body doesn't travel. Or I think I said sarcastically, the body travels to the cremation site. And that's it. So that we can say the body travels that much. Does the mind travel? Depends on your perspective. In modern science, the answer would be absolutely not. Because the mind is understood to be hosted by the brain ceases to exist even before the cremation fire, and therefore, I should say the brain ceases to function long before that cremation fire. So from a modern standpoint, we would say the mind does not travel. If we look at it from the standpoint of the ancient model of the stula and sukshma sharira, the mind is part of that sukshma sharira, which is the transmigrating entity. But even there we have a problem. Because according to that model, mind, just as your body is made of physical stuff, mind is made of subtle stuff. Body is stula sharira, mind is part of sukshma sharira, sukshma meaning subtle, subtle meaning non-physical. But if stula stuff, physical elements are inert, then subtle elements must similarly be inert. So even if there is a sukshma sharira that travels, it's inert. And jiva, the transmigrating entity, cannot be an inert thing. It's a conscious being. So therefore, even if mind travels, it is not the jiva. And then we consider, well, does consciousness travel? When consciousness is already everywhere all the time, how can it go anywhere? All pervasive, boundaryless, limitless, as you've heard before, one all-pervasive consciousness manifests in many beings. Then we came to a very conventional definition that the jiva is not any one of them in particular. Oh, the other one we missed over is that jiva is the abhasa, the reflection of consciousness in the mind. But it's easy to pick that one apart because how substantial is that reflection? If you remove the mirror, if you take a physical reflection of a face in a mirror, which is Shankara's metaphor here, if you remove the mirror, the reflected face goes away. If you remove the face, the reflected face goes away. So that reflection, abhasa, also is not very substantial. So that, going through these various options, what we can conclude then is any one of them is not the transmigrating entity. So when I say any one of them, that's definitely pointing to the fact that jiva, the transmigrating entity, must be a composite being. And then we come up with a very conventional explanation that jiva is, I'll be a little bit technical now. Jiva is consciousness with mind. Consciousness with mind. It's like a minimum definition. Consciousness of that composite of the two. A more technical way of describing, and a way that Shankaracharya and many others have described as jiva, is karta and bhokta. This relates very much to the doctrine of karma. Karta, agent of action. Bhokta, now generally speaking, bhokta means the one who has experience, but in a more focused understanding, according to the doctrine of karma, bhokta is the one who reaps the results of the karmas committed. So karma and bhokta, if you look at it through the lens of karma, the doctrine of karma, karta, one who does the action, bhokta, one who reaps the results. And from the lens of the doctrine of karma, that really makes a lot of sense, because the whole the doctrine of karma is the source for the belief in reincarnation. Notice I said belief, right? So doctrine of karma is the basis for the belief in reincarnation, and therefore it's explained that the one who transmigrates is the one who did the deeds and therefore must accrue their results, if not in this life, in a future life. So, and in our prior class, we saw a Buddhist perspective, we saw other Vedantic perspectives. There are a lot of ways of examining this issue. Who travels? Who is a samsari? Who is a jiva? And in 2 verses, Shankara is going to shake you up by saying none of them are right. So we'll see that in just a minute. He gives a surprising answer, and I think you will genuinely be surprised when we get there. So with that introduction, let us pick up the thread. So our topic then is the use of Pratibimba-vada to explain who travels. Atma-bhasa-shrayas-chaivam Atma-bhasa-shrayas-chaivam Mukha-bhasa-shrayayata Mukha-bhasa-shrayayata Gamyate shastra-yuktibhyam Gamyate shastra-yuktibhyam yuktibhyam abhasa sattvameva cha abhasa sattvameva cha. So in the first half, Shankara restates this abhasavada. He says when you're talking about atma, consciousness, abhasa, it's reflection, and reflection, please don't think of that abstractly. Reflection means whatever you're experiencing right now. Experience is reflected consciousness. Your reflection is, your experience right now is not a concept. Therefore, abhasa, reflected consciousness, is not a concept. It's what you're experiencing right now. Okay, so these three principles, atma, consciousness, abhasa, the reflection of consciousness in the mind, and ashraya, the locus of that reflection, which is the mind. These are represented metaphorically by mukha, your face reflected in a mirror, abhasa, the reflection of your face in the mirror, and ashraya, the locus of the reflection of your face, which is the mirror. So we've been through this quite a bit in prior verses. Now he's going to start to build a new argument here. He is saying in the final line, abhasa asatvam eva. And here you have to know how to chop up these words properly. If you miss that of asatvam, you get the opposite meaning, right? Okay. So that abhasa is asatvam. Satvam means real. The abhasa is asatvam. It is unreal. How do we know that? Gamyate in the third line. This is understood through Shastra, through our teachings, but not just through our teachings, yukti bhyam, through these two, through your own analysis, through your own use of reasoning. And Shankara has actually done that before. Remember our definition of real. And this is crucial to understand these teachings. So Shankara here says the abhasa is not real. Why? Anything real must be abiding. Past, present, and future. Is your face in the mirror abiding? We've already dealt with that. So the fact that you remove the mirror and the reflection goes, you don't have to, just tilt it a little bit. And your reflection goes away. Or if the mirror is covered by dirt, or any number of ways we can show that the reflection is not abiding. So too, your consciousness. Your experience. Sorry, I'm a little foggy today. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, your experience comes and goes. What did you experience last night in deep sleep? Nothing. What do you experience if you achieve deep samadhi? Nothing. What will you experience after your last exhalation? Okay, you get the point. So, experience comes and goes. The corollary to that, of course, is that which is abiding is also unchanging. These two necessarily go together. Oh, and lots of fog. These two necessarily go together, unchanging and abiding, because anything that changes ceases to be what it used to be. So, abiding equals unchanging, unchanging equals abiding. Abiding, nitya, and unchanging, many words. Avyaya, akshara, words like that, I mean unchanging. Okay, so he has now brought us back. By the way, I've skipped over a bunch of verses, and I'm doing that throughout chapter 18 because of its length. And generally what I'm skipping over are the more fussy bits, the more technical bits. So Shankara himself does a lot of purva-paksha siddhanta in between, and it gets a little... if you don't enjoy logic, it gets annoying. So we'll choose to skip over that bit. That's why he's reintroducing this Pratibimbavada, because he's gone off on a little bit of a detour, and now he's coming back to our main topic with this verse 43, followed by verse 44. Nadrasher havikaritvat, nadrasher havikaritvat, abhasasyapya vastutaha, abhasasyavi vastutaha, na chitittvarahankartuhu, na chitittvarahankartutu, kasya samsarita bhavet, kasya samsari bhavet. So this is now the setup for his surprising question. So he goes on, I guess this is what in Western logic, reductio ad absurdum, to take a idea and just show how any way you look at it, it falls apart. It literally means reduce it to the absurd. You just show the logical untenability of an idea. And here what Shankara is doing is showing the logical untenability of the very existence of a transmigrating entity. Can you guess where he's going with this? We'll see. So he says, nadrashehe, that transmigrating entity, samsari, karta bhokta, we can call it, whatever perspective you want to adopt, he says that the one that travels, na drashehe, cannot be the drishi, the observer consciousness. Why? Avikaritvat. Consciousness is unchanging. To travel is a change of condition. It's no longer here, it's now there. That's a change. There are many kinds. Generally, we think of changes as the change of the thing itself. But there are other kinds of changes. There are changes of location. There's a difference between this pot and this pot. How about this one? See if you can get this. What is the difference between this pot and this pot? About 5 seconds. There's a change in time. We tend to overlook these. There's a transpositional change. There's also a time change. And consciousness is free from even these changes. Consciousness doesn't change in time, avikaritvat, because it's unchanging, and nor does it change in position. Why? Avikaritvat. It is unchanging. So unchanging includes spatially and time-wise. So if the traveling entity is not consciousness, then it must be abhasa. But he says abhasasya api. You can't say that the traveling entity is the abhasa, the reflection. Why? Avastutaha, because it's not real. It comes and goes. So our idea of the transmigrating entity is an essence of who you are that travels life after life after life, or as they say, death after death. Puja Swamiji used to say, life after life is far too optimistic. So, either way. So as we just saw in a prior verse, that abhasa is not a real entity. And then one option we considered in our prior class is ego, ahankara. And he says, na ahankartuhu, nor can you attribute it to the ahankara, the ego, that mental activity that says, I am. Don't let this ahankara be conceptual either. The ahankara is a specific mental function or mental activity that gives you the sense of being an individual person. Figuratively speaking, it's a thought that says, I am this, I am that, I am this, I am that. And he says that, na ahankartuhu, it can't be that ahankara. Why? A-chittitvat. Chitti here is consciousness, not mind. And ahankara is a-chitti, it's not conscious. It's a thought. Thought is mind. Mind is subtle stuff. Stuff is inert. So Shankara is just whacking away here at every way you try to define who is it that travels. He finds some problem with any theory, even those theories that are consistent with Advaita Vedanta. Please note that in a lot of Advaita Vedanta, we accept the transmigrating jiva. But I'd like to remind you of something we talked about in the last class and many previous classes. Look at this. Advaita Vedanta in one text will say the jiva is a transmigrating entity and the jiva is consciousness with mind. Or mind with consciousness, either way. And then later, Shankara is saying here, the transmigrating entity cannot be that jiva for all of these reasons. What's going on here? In one place, you'll say that the jiva is a transmigrating entity, but Shankara, for 2 classes now, our prior class and this class, has been disproving all these possibilities of a transmigrating entity. What's going on? This is classical Vedanta. In technical terms, I don't, this is methodology, right? So we said in simple terms, methodology means stepping stones. And you have to give up the prior stepping stone for the sake of moving on to the next. You can't hold on. And many people get stuck with this because they make the mistake, as we discussed in our prior class, that Vedanta is imparting information about a jiva that actually travels from one life to the next. That's the prior stepping stone. We have to be ready to give it up and move on to the next stepping stone. Some of you may have heard this technical term, adhyaropa and apavada. This is a technical way of describing what I very simply described with these stepping stones. Vedanta works through a process of adhyaropa, literally superimposition, but logically speaking, we would say making a hypothesis. It's like this. Suppose it's like this. And then apavada is the removal of that superimposition. That's the technical meaning of these words. But logically, it is the negation of what you hypothesized. So Vedanta says, it might be like this. No, it's not. It might be like that. No. It might be like that. No. In fact, it doesn't say it might be. It says it is. Vedanta says, it's this. Then, no, it isn't. It's that. No, it isn't. It's that. No, it isn't. It's our neti playing out in a different way. And some of you remember the Arunda Darshana Nyaya, the going from star to star. I don't want to repeat all of that. So this is the setup right now, is yes, the jiva has been posited, and now comes the negation. So if all these possibilities have been negated, kasya samsarita bhavet. Kasya, for whom samsarita is the status of being a samsari, for whom is the state of being a jiva. Before we see the answer, let me show you just a little bit of logic that Maybe Shankara took in some of the verses that we skipped over, but I don't think so. But some logic. I've said that a very conventional way of explaining jiva in conventional Vedanta, the conventional, I'm repeating that word a lot, the conventional way of explaining jiva is as a composite entity. That's the language that I've used. It's not atma alone, it's not mind or ahankara or abhasa alone, but it is the combination of these factors. Now here's the problem with that. Sounds good, right? No, it doesn't. Because what you're doing now is adding two things. You're adding a consciousness. You're making a composite of consciousness and mind. Consciousness is satyam. Mind is mithya. And to demonstrate the logical ridiculousness of that position, suppose we combine pot and clay. Does that make sense? To combine pot and... Is that how this came about? There was clay over here, and then we added some pot to it. You can't add pot and clay because they're completely different levels of reality. Maybe let me try one more metaphor. Different levels of reality. We often use dreams to show a different level of reality. So if you have a net worth of $10, but in your dream, your bank account is $1 million, can you say that you're worth $1,010,010? Add them up, right? You can't add dream money, or like you played this Monopoly game, you have that Monopoly. Can you add that to what's in your bank account? You can't add. So what I'm pointing out is the defect in reasoning in a conventional explanation. And we do this all the time in Vedanta. And we love to do it because it's the method of Vedanta. To reiterate what we said last week, Vedanta does not, the purpose of Vedanta is not to impart information. The purpose of Vedanta is to lead you from one understanding to a better understanding to a better understanding. And the way that's done is by destroying those previous understandings. So, now, with all of that having been done, all the negation is done, now we finally come to Shankara's, his siddhanta, his final position. Which is avidya matra he vataha, avidya matra he vataha, samsarostva vivekitaha, samsarostva vivekataha, kutastenatmana nityam, kutastenatmana nityam, atmavan atmanivasaha, atmavan atmanivasaha. And he says, ataha, at the end of the first line, ataha, because we've negated all the other possibilities, then what is this transmigrating entity? Avidya matram. It is a fiction of your mind. Literally mere ignorance, but it is an idea you've dreamed up. It's as real as the elephant in my hand. That's how real that transmigrating entity is. And just to to illustrate that. So he says, avidya matraha eva samsaraha. That's samsara, the experience of going from life to life, rebirth to rebirth. He says that it is avidya matra, it is fictitious, and it's so easy to get that. Watch this. Let's stay with this pratibimba-vada and look at transmigration from this standpoint. So you're looking at a mirror, in figuratively speaking, in this life, and I'm intentionally combining the metaphors, mixing the metaphors. So in this life, you're looking in one mirror. One mirror is mind, right? Next life, you're going to have a different brain, different mind. So suppose you're looking in this mirror, and then you get another mirror. And now I'm looking in this mirror. Looking in this mirror, and then I look in this mirror. Watch this. And I'm clueless, and I make this conclusion. When I look in this mirror, my reflection is no longer in this mirror. Therefore, my reflection has moved from this mirror to that mirror. Huh? Does that even begin to make sense? Reflections move. Reflections aren't real. Reflections aren't real. If you see your reflection, try to touch your nose. You'll touch the mirror. You won't touch your nose. Reflection is a metaphor to stress what we started our class with. Okay, enough said. So it doesn't travel because it's not real. Only something that's real that can travel can travel. It seems to travel though. Why? So samsaraha astu, samsara is avidya matra, but it seems to take place. Why? Avivekataha, due to lack of discernment, due to proper thinking. You think that the reflection has moved from one mirror to the other. Let me demonstrate. Watch this. This is a trick. I'm going to move the elephant from my left hand to the right hand. Pretty good, huh? I'm being silly, but I'm making a point. It's all ignorance. That which is unreal can't travel from my left hand to my right hand. But we attribute a lot of reality to that transmigrating entity. Why? Because, and this is not what Shankara is teaching. I'm adding this because I think it'll put this discussion on a different footing, but an important footing. Why is there so much emphasis on the reality of the jiva? Notice Shankara has been going on for verse after verse, tearing apart this idea of jiva. Then why is it such a central teaching? Not just in Advaita Vedanta, but throughout Hinduism. Some of you have figured it out. It's because of the doctrine of karma. The doctrine of karma is a belief system that is deeply embedded in these universal teachings of Advaita Vedanta. The teachings of Advaita Vedanta very clearly are not a belief system. In fact, any belief gets torn apart, as Shankara has just shown. But that doctrine of karma is a belief system that is so deeply embedded in the tradition that it's assumed to be true. And this is a topic for an advanced text, like, I can't call it an advanced text, but it's certainly not an introductory text. In an introductory text, definitely will assume the doctrine of karma. Why? It's helpful. It explains lots of questions we have, and we need to explain questions, and thank goodness we have the doctrine of karma, and it sure explains questions a lot better than the Bible does, right? If you look at biblical perspectives, it's very weak in explaining what the doctrine of karma can explain so brilliantly. So here's what happens. That because the doctrine of karma is embedded so deeply in the Hindu mind, it's assumed to be true. And when a Vedantin starts going through the teachings of Vedanta, if you cling to the doctrine of karma as being real and true, you're in for a kick in the head, so to speak, when Vedanta tells you it's not real. It's not true. It's not true in the sense that Atma is Brahman. It's not true as an absolute truth. If you want to treat it as relative truth, excellent. The doctrine of karma is a relative truth that explains very well what happens in the world, what happens from one life to another. Fine. Don't extend it into the realm of absolute truth. So, we attribute reality to things that don't deserve reality. Starting with the body. The body is absolutely real. Mind, senses, and then extending it out to doctrine of karma. And lokas, by the way, lokas are also part of the doctrine of karma. It's all one batch, one big, complicated, messy, fuzzy, complicated batch of ideas and teachings, and they all interrelate. And none of it is absolutely true. Relatively real, no absolute reality to it. But we attribute reality to it, and that's a mistake. And that's what he means here in the latter part of this verse. He says, Kutastena atmana, because atma is kutastha, unchanging, and has an interesting meaning. Kuta is anvil. So kutastha, that which remains unchanging as an anvil. In order to understand that ancient metaphor, you have to understand that an anvil was a commonplace experience in ancient times. If you needed some metal thing fixed, you'd go to the blacksmith. Nowadays, if you need something fixed, you throw it away and buy a new one. This is our throwaway society. Obviously, in ancient times, you couldn't afford to do that. So people had the experience of going to a blacksmith who would heat up the metal until it's glowing red. He'd put it on an anvil and bang on it. And here's the point. The metal thing changed, the anvil didn't. The unchanging substratum for changing realities. That's why it's such an important metaphor. The unchanging substratum, because of which the changing world can exist. What better metaphor in ancient times than an anvil? Of course, nowadays we have to remember how anvils were used. So that's that word kutastha. Kutastena atmana, because of this unchanging consciousness. We have this superimposition of atmavan atmani eva saha, saha samsaraha. We have to connect the two halves of the verse. That samsara seems nityam, seems eternal, seems atmavan, seems to be possessed of a real essence. Atmavan here has that sense. Containing a real essence, possessing a real essence. And it seems Atmani Eva, it seems to be as though Atma. And all of this is due to our false attribution of reality. Reality attributed to the body, mind, senses. Reality attributed to the idea of reincarnation. Reality attributed to the whole doctrine of karma. Reality attributed to a reincarnating entity or jiva. Eventually, we have to be ready to let go of that concept. You did, simple terms, you never got reborn, because to get reborn, you have to be born in the first place. You were never born in the first place. How can you be reborn? Consciousness doesn't get born. This is Advaita Vedanta. And you can see how it leaves behind the doctrine of karma. Okay, let's see one more verse. Raju sarpo yata rajva, Raju sarpo yata rajva, Satmaka pragvivekataha, Satmaka pragvivekataha, Avastu sannapihyesha, Avastu sannapihyesha, Kutastenatmana tata, Kutastenatmana tata. So back to our common example of the Raju Sarpa, the rope snake. Yata, just as Raju Sarpa, a rope snake, Satmakaha, Sa-atmakaha, seems to be possessed of an underlying reality, Rajva, because of the rope. So just as a rope snake seems real because of the superimposition of the reality of the rope gets superimposed on the snake, it then seems to be satmaka, possessed of an underlying reality. Of course, prakvivekataha, before you discern that it's really a rope. I like to play with metaphors. How about this? You go down the alley and you see the rope snake. Does this work? Then the guy says that, oh no, it's not a snake, it's a rope. So that snake is gone. Then you go down the same alley. Then you go down another alley and you see another rope snake. This is silly, but yeah, I got myself into it, so I have to finish. So would you conclude that the snake that you saw in the other alley, which got destroyed when you realized it was a rope, it has reincarnated in the new alley? I'm just trying to make some kind of connection just to show the silliness of this reincarnation thing. So anyway, that rope snake is taken as real prior to proper discernment. In the same way, tata, in the last word here, in the same way, eshaha, the pronoun he eshaha, indeed, eshaha samsari, this transmigrating entity is like the rope snake. Avastu san api, even though that transmigrating entity, avastu san, is being unreal. I'm being very literal here. Even though it's not absolutely real, It still seems to be there. Why? Kutastena atmana, due to its real substratum. And here Shankara is pointing out something very Vedantic and very important. Could the rope snake exist without a rope? Could a transmigrating entity exist without Atma? So let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, which is more or less what the Buddhists do. Because they say that jiva is fiction, and that which is fiction has no reality, so there is no transmigrating self. You realize the insubstantiality of who you are as a transmigrating entity in this life. And for the Buddhist, that's moksha. To realize the insubstantiality of the individual person. So, and Shankara agrees with 99%. We all agree with 99% of that. We agree that when you put all these parts together, it's pretty arbitrary to say that this particular combination of parts is Swami Tadatmananda. We've just decided to agree on that. But really, which part is Swami Tadatmananda? The body? Mind? Consciousness? We've done this process of deconstruction. You break something down into its component parts. It's just a bunch of parts. This is the main teaching of Buddhism, and they have a fancy name for it, pratitya samutpada. And that is when you put a bunch of parts together, there arises a unique individual being that appears due to the combination of all these parts. But if you do this logical deconstruction, there is no being. The existence of the being is a fiction, and the Vedantic teaching of ahankara I've never seen used in Buddhism, but I think they could possibly accept it, because the ahankara is that which gives us the sense of being an individual being. And as we've discussed, that sense comes and goes, so how real is it? So I think Buddhists, I don't know, it'd be interesting to, wouldn't be interesting to go through a lot of Buddhist texts to find out if they ever talk about ahankara. I don't think I'm going to do that anytime soon, because I don't think it would be interesting. But even if they did accept ahankara, they would accept it very much. So, therefore, we deconstruct the individual being. There is no jiva, and therefore, there is no one who suffers. Except, how can there be a rope snake without a rope? That's Buddhism. You don't need the rope. This is where Advaita Vedanta criticizes Buddhism, because they say there is no underlying reality. And they have to say that. Let me just conclude this topic. Actually, it's not really a detour, but just to make it very clear. Remember that Vedanta is based on Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. So Shruti says that there is a real substratum. Through Yukti, we confirm that through logic, and through Anubhava. The consciousness, which is my essential nature, is that substratum. So, Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. Vedanta has, this is a bad metaphor. Buddhism has lost its thumb. Thumb was Shruti. So, Buddha himself did not accept the authority of the Vedas, so Shruti is out. So you're left with yukti and anubhava, which they use brilliantly. There are the logic used in later Buddhist texts, not at the time of Buddha, but it got developed a lot over the centuries. The logic that they used is equal to and beyond Shankara's. It's amazing, really. Great scholars of logic. So with that logic, they can do this deconstruction. There is no individual. There is no one who suffers. If there's no one who suffers, and if you know that there is no one who suffers, then you can't say, I suffer. This is Buddhist moksha. It is a fiction to believe that I suffer. That's where you're left if you don't have a fundamental reality, because you have only yukti and anubhava. With Shruti, we have this teaching of a fundamental reality which transforms the whole thing. But the long and short of it is what I illustrated with that silly metaphor. And that is, how can there be a rope snake without a rope? This is Advaita Vedanta's perspective. Okay. I think that's a good place. We'll see a little different topic next time we meet, and we'll conclude here. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om. Tat sat.